Hi, hello everybody. Welcome to this webinar about whales are they poo. This event is part of the Nature-Based Future Challenge. So I expect that some of the participants of the challenge are in the audiences. Hello, welcome, greetings and good luck with your first milestone report. Also welcome to all other people in the audience, students and professionals interested in marine ecology, whales, nature-based solutions, all whale lovers. Hello. My name is Marta Ehers. I'm part of the VUR Student Challenges team. We are organizer of the Nature-Based Future Challenge and also of this webinar. And with me in the studio is a person with a very unusual title and very interesting daily job, Frank Zanderink. Welcome.
Thank you.
He's Poo Ambassador and the director of the Rugvin Stichting. So, welcome, Frank.
Thank you, Marta.
Frank, was it your childhood dream to become a Poo Ambassador?
Well, it's a funny question, but when I was a kid, we didn't know much about whales, let alone about whale poo, so it didn't come up in my mind. But nowadays, we make a lot of children Poo Ambassador during education sessions.
Oh, that's nice to hear. And so, how did you become a Poo Ambassador, and how did you go about starting your foundation?
Well, I have a background in tropical forestry, but when I was a student in Wageningen, I joined the Greenpeace local team, and at that time there was still whale hunting, so whaling all across the globe, and I worked on that as well until the moratorium, so the stop of the commercial whaling. I started working on land, but as we say in Dutch, the blood creeps where it can't go, so I got back to the marine environment. It has always been a hobby, but now I make my profession of it as well. And in COVID time, or just pre-COVID, I started reading about whale poo, the whale pump, migration routes, etc. And a complete new topic came to me.
Oh, wow. Well, that's a fascinating story. So now I know that you know everything about whales and whale poo, and you have a great story to share with us today. Before I give floor to you, I just have a very small announcement. So everybody's welcome to ask the questions in the chat, and we'll answer them as much as possible at the end of the presentation. And now I leave the floor to you, Frank. Enjoy the story.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I'm not sure where you're all living right now. My name again is Frank Zanderink. I live nearby Arnhem in the Netherlands. I'm the director of the Rugvin Foundation. And before I start with the main topic of this webinar, I give you a short introduction about the foundation. Stichting Rugvin, Rugvin meaning the dorsal fin on the back of the animals. We started almost 17 years ago on the ferries between England and the Netherlands, and also later on between the Netherlands and Norway, monitoring cetaceans, meaning all whales, dolphins and porpoises from the water. We still do this, except for the Norway line. This line stopped, but it gave us a good base for our activities. What we see on the way in the North Sea is white-beaked dolphins, orcas, minke whales, porpoises, harbor porpoises, bottlenose dolphins, and well, these are the main species, and so now and then humpback whales. In the Eastern Scheldt, we work on photo identification of harbor porpoises. It's in the southwest of the Netherlands, and for the ones living in the Netherlands or studying in the Netherlands, well, go one day in spring or summer to Zierikzee, and there you find Studio porpoise. It's one of the best locations of Europe to see this small whale, the harbor porpoise. With taking pictures of these small cetaceans, we learn a lot about this quite elusive animal. There's also a location, what we call Studio porpoise, and that's the only place in Europe where you can hear live cetaceans and see them at the same time. So go to Zierikzee in Zeeland in the Netherlands. Oh, that goes too quickly. We don't do only research, but we, there's something wrong with the slides. We try to have all our data, reports, etc. in the news. It could be in magazines like National Geographic or a photo exhibition. We invite press, so it's not only for our own use, but also for public use. Actively, we also go to kids, teach them. We have a children's book. We give lectures like this. So we are quite active in, stimulating students, profs, etc. in taking on information about whales, dolphins, and porpoises. But today's story is about whale poo, whale pump, and the outcome of all that towards the climate, climate change, and marine biodiversity. In the coming session up to the end, I will learn you a little about this because there's a lot to talk about, but there's also a lot to do research on. This is one of the least known environments. We focus on techniques, we focus on land, but we hardly know anything about the marine environment. And that's a pity, because half of the carbon dioxide, which we produce as humans, is being absorbed by phytoplankton in the oceans. And half of the oxygen we actually now use is produced by the phytoplankton in the oceans. And that's hardly known. And I will tell you the role of the whales towards this. But before that, we go back in time, so you can have some time reference about whaling, the role whales could have played when there was still a lot. We used to hunt whales all over the world, and we killed most of them. The total population of the larger whales declined by 90–95%. We don't know, because figures from these days are not present. It's all estimations. And why did we kill these whales? Well, mainly for oil, to burn oil lamps, but we used it also for lubricants, petticoats, you name it, and eventually also for meat. Nowadays, meat is still consumed in Japan, in Norway, Iceland. The latter two countries hopefully will stop in a couple of years. But still, let's say a country like Norway kills 1,100 large whales per annum. So that's quite a lot. So most calves, well, not literally the calves, but the increase is being killed during the year as well. There's hardly any growth of the whale populations. But it sounds as a contradiction, but actually the whales were helped by the industry when they found oil. So there was no need or big need anymore for killing whales, because the oil was easier to find and exploit on land. So that caused that we are not driving cars now on whale oil, but on earth oil, so to speak. So in a way, the big oil companies, which started to have exploration of oil wells, etc., saved the whales. It sounds crazy, especially nowadays, but there is some truth in this. If we didn't have found earth oil, then probably no big whales have had left on our planet. But we stopped the commercial whaling by action groups in the 80s. It started in the 70s, but the biggest protests were in the 80s. I helped in this as well. And eventually there was a moratorium in 1986 by the International Whaling Committee, where most whaling countries accepted there was a ban on the hunting, the whaling of the larger whales. Of course, local people were still allowed, and some countries said we keep on hunting this for scientific reasons. But since that, there's not a single report being published what was accepted as scientifically worthwhile. My story is about the role the whales play, and I focus on the whales. But it's not only the whales in the oceans and the seas which play an important role for climate change and marine diversity. All creatures, small and big, do play a role. From the coastal areas, there's manatees, otters, turtles, sharks, mangroves, seagrasses, which also absorb carbon dioxide and produce oxygen. But the biggest production of oxygen and absorption of carbon dioxide plays in the oceans, in the polar seas, etc. And there's hardly any human influence, but it is the big whales who take care of this phytoplankton, so to speak. How do they do this? Oh, it goes too quickly again. Well, it's actually in 4 ways. One is called the carbon sink. When a whale dies, it sinks to the bottom, but all the carbon being collected in their bones and body will go to the bottom as well, so it doesn't come into the atmosphere. That's a direct link. Then there's the whale pump and the whale poo and the conveyor belt, and it all has to do with nutrients, taking care of the growth of phytoplankton in the oceans. The whale pump, the whale poo, and the conveyor belt will come up now. The carbon capture, a whale can live for at least 30, 40 years, up to 250 years for the bowheads. So they live quite long, if not hunted. But at the time they die, then normally they will sink to the bottom and stay there hundreds of thousands of years. And so this carbon being captured in their bones won't get in our atmosphere or go on land. The whale pump is when deep diving creatures, deep diving whales like sperm whales, beaked whales who could reach sea floors of 2, 3, even 4 kilometers deep. When they go up again, they suck within their vertical movements nutrients from the bottom up to the surface of the seas and oceans. And that's full of nutrients like iron, phosphorus, nitrogen, and other minerals. And don't underestimate this. The effect of this deep diving cetaceans is as much as the mixing for all storms, tidal currents, winds, you name it. It's quite intensive. The other important thing is the whale poo. And it sounds a bit dirty, but look at it as a cow dung. I think in every country we use dung of large mammals to fertilize our lands for growing crops, potatoes, corn, you name it. So if you're a farmer or agriculture, you know all about this. But in the sea, large whales and even the small cetaceans like porpoises and dolphins can be seen as the farmers of the ocean. And here I pause for a moment while having you looking at this animal. This is a blue whale. And start thinking about it. This whale is about 30 meters. It is the size of 30 male African elephants. What do you think one blue whale produces in poo per day? Well, put your figure in the chat, please. Well, there's just one figure, so there's not a lot to type. But I will tell you now, it's more than 5,000 kilograms per day. And that's a huge amount. And if you realize now that in the past we had 200 to 300,000 of only blue whales, that's a lot of poo, a lot of dung per day. Nowadays, only from the blue whale, there's 5, 6, maybe 7,000. So there's a huge decrease. And why is this so important? And what's so special about the whale poo? Well, whale poo, it floats. And when a whale is underwater, because of the water pressure, it can't poo. Only in the upper layer, it can literally release itself, and then the poo floats to the surface. And what's there at the surface? Well, there's the sun, there's the phytoplankton, there's the warmth. So everything comes together. If you're a gardener, you know all about it. Well, the water is all around it, but you need the sun, you need warmth, and you need nutrients. Well, again, I said it, the whales are the gardeners, they are the farmers of the sea, they bring the nutrients up by the whale pump, bringing nutrients up, but also directly by their poo. And it goes in thousands of kilograms per day per animal. So that's quite a lot. But whales don't stay at the same place. They move around. Some, like the Bryde's whales in the Gulf of Bengal, they stay around. But most larger species, they migrate from polar seas up to the equator. And during the trip up and down, they release themselves as well. So on these migration routes, you can see the effect of the whale poo. And NASA have satellite images where you can see that a few days later, these migrating routes, they turn green due to the algae growth, the phytoplankton growth. So they feed in cold waters, but when it comes wintertime, they go to much warmer places, and on the way to equator areas, or even, well, it's not on the equator, but for example, the South Africa, South America, so the continents, they release a lot of poo on the way. So they spread also not only vertically, but also horizontally, the manure, the dung, the nutrients all over the ocean. So to summarize this, there's whale pooing around vertically on the surface, but also horizontally, and they bring by pump and by poo the nutrients from the floor and from themselves to the surface, where phytoplankton grows. Phytoplankton, algae, weeds, seaweeds, etc. They float on the upper layer of the water column. There's the sun. The carbon dioxide is in constant exchange of the water, so it goes in, and when there's too much, it goes out. Oxygen being produced by the phytoplankton finds its way up and comes in the atmosphere. And of course, there's a photosynthesis as well. So by the carbon dioxide and the water, sugar is being made by the plants, and they grow on that. This shows places where, well, to give you an image of algae, probably you have seen many of them, that this is under a microscope, but also NASA satellite images. This is a place where whales have been around, and after a few days, the whole bay turns green due to, well, the effect of whale poo on the growth of phytoplankton. But what's also so exciting and important about the whale poo, it's not just a bag of manure being dumped in the sea. It has special components like iron, and it differs a bit by the whale species itself. But to give you a few examples, when a sperm whale here in the picture releases itself, so produces a lot of dung, there's a lot of iron in it. And the iron in the dung of a sperm whale is as 10 million times as high as the surrounding water it lives in. So you really got a boost by the iron, and plants need iron. So if there's no iron around, there's no or hardly any growth of the algae, of the seaweed or whatever. The same is for phosphate. It's less spectacular, but still it's having a huge effect. Humpbacks on the left, fin whales on the left bottom, there's porpoise, and blue whale on the right. They show, well, between 600 and 800 times the amount of phosphate if you compare it with the surrounding seawater. So you can see this all as a boost for the growth. It's like you put a bag with manure in your garden or you don't, you will see the difference. The same for nitrogen. Not of all species this has been researched. The overall research for marine mammals and the effect of the ecosystem is still in the beginning, the pioneering phase. But nowadays we already see it is huge. And to see in rough figures, if you see the rough figures of pre-whaling time, so before the commercial whaling took place, and we look at the bottom nowadays, the decline of the effect by sperm whales by capturing carbon, it declined by 83%. The same is with carbon by blue whales with 98%. By the migration of the migrating whales, there's a decline of 99%. So if we would have been still having all these whales in the past, maybe there wasn't even a climate problem nowadays. We don't know, and it's difficult to find out, but if you look at these figures, you can imagine that at least there was a big difference. Getting back to this and summarize a little, you see there's a lot of effects of whales. This is the deep diving, there's the migration routes, there's the pooing directly to the phytoplankton, and there's the carbon sink. So there's 4 elements directly linked with whales in the food web. But it's not only for climate, biodiversity. You all probably already know that phytoplankton is already, or is only the start of the marine ecosystem. Phytoplankton is eaten by zooplankton, and this will be eaten by fish, or will be eaten by turtles and sharks. So it all starts off with phytoplankton, and then this food web, sometimes it's a small circle, sometimes it's a long circle when you have top predators. But you can even say that fishermen who fish nearby the land and have small boats and small nets, they're very depending on the poo of whales. Without the poo, the marine biodiversity wouldn't exist. If there are less whales, there's less poo, there's less phytoplankton, there's less zooplankton, and there will be less food for fish to eat. A couple of years ago, in 2019, there came a report being published by the IMF, by Ralph Chummy, and he started calculating in very rough figures the value of a whale. And he started summarizing the contribution of large whales to fisheries, to tourism, to carbon capture. And he estimated that the value of a whale was about $2 to $3 million per animal. And if you compare that with the market price of a dead whale, which has been shot by Japanese and Norwegian hunters, it's only 50,000 euro on the market. So from the economic side, it's even actually a nightmare that we still do this. Better save the whales, and on the long term, it will be beneficial for everybody. Are we as people not doing anything about that? Good question. But there's already, the slide shows 41 nations, but it's actually only 44 countries who say, yes, we believe in this matter, that whales are important for the ocean. As Rugvin ourselves, we will continue working also in lobbying with the government. So they say, yes, it's true. So the story I'm telling you now, but they put the report in the back of their drawers. And we only have to face still threats to the whales. There's plastic, there's ship strikes, there's net entanglement, etc. And still the killing. So instead of saving them, we'll still hunt and bring a lot of danger to the whales. And then we only discussed the big whales. There's a lot to talk about small whales as well. I will do this in a very short way. But we started to work on the effects of harbor porpoise poo towards the growth of algae in eastern shelf waters and North Sea waters. Well, this is the harbor porpoise. We've take the poo from dead animals and we bring it into the lab and we start working out how much poo has an effect. And we came to nice conclusions that the more poo, the better it is, but eventually the algae run out of poo or nutrients and they stop growing. But we see a lot of growth being caused by porpoise poo. And this probably is valid for all whales and all dolphins. But science is always asking to have proof for everything. But you see by these graphs that the more porpoise poo, defined by also different concentrations, it has an effect on the growth of most algae. So I will thank you for listening to this. It's just a brief introduction about the effects of whales on marine biodiversity, but also indirectly on the climate change or preservation of our already changing climate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank. I think Frank has left us for a second. No, I think maybe then your camera is off.
No, I don't know what happened, but I pressed one more slide and then I was off. But
and then poof.
Yeah.
You can rejoin us perhaps via the same link that you joined the webinar. I can also see if I can do something about it, let's say. Oh, look.
What?
You back. Well, great. Thank you very much for this presentation, Frank. It was a very fascinating story to hear. And for me, as a person who doesn't know so much about whales and marine ecosystems, was so very clarifying, very clear presentation. There is now time for questions, but before we go to the questions that are in the chat, actually, I was asking myself, because of course, when you hear your story, you really want to do something about it. You want to make whales happy and let them get more babies and have whales repopulate the oceans. So what can we do actually? What action is needed now to help whales?
Well, I think it all starts with acknowledgement and education. As long as people don't know anything about the role whales play globally wide and in all oceans and all seas, then it doesn't work. So we have to acknowledge that whales do play an important role. And already 44 countries do acknowledge it, but still don't act it. So the second step is start working on action and start saving and helping out, facilitating the life of whales. And it's actually is not very costly, but it's just stopping a lot of things. Like throwing rubbish in the water. It doesn't cost anything. Don't produce that much plastics. Recycle it. Don't throw it in the water. Look in your own cupboard. What is there? And these are the home issues, so to speak. But the other thing, is more governmental work. That in areas where whales do migrate or calve or mate, that ships shouldn't drive fast through it. So ship strikes can be avoided. Having other engines, and I know these are technical and some pricey things, but we do have images, footage from satellites that you see blue whales not able of swimming through shipping routes because the engines make a lot of noise. They are afraid of that. But let's start with acknowledgement and education and giving more examples about the effects. So if you're a student working in marine environment, there's a lot to do on working out what actually is the effect of all these whales. There's a lot of figures missing, a lot of data missing. We know all about where bottlenose dolphins are swimming and how many times they dive, but the role they play in the environment, that's still pretty blank. So if you want to pioneer in science, dive in the marine environment, and this, I can keep on talking for hours in what you can do.
I think that's a very clear call to action and very tangible for many students. I would like to move to the question from Nina. So she's asking if different species of whales have different diets, and if so, do different diets have different influences on phytoplankton's fertilization?
That's correct. Well, in general, the baleen whales, so not the toothed whales like sperm whales and dolphins and porpoises, but the baleen whales, they live on zooplankton and small fish. And their poo is the best floating ones. And they live, and these can be more or less compared. But if you look at the manure or the dung of sperm whales, they go down and catch octopuses, etc. And these are rich in iron. And when they go to the surface and release their poo, the poo, and like I showed you in one of the images, is very, very rich on iron. So it does differ. But from many species, we don't know it yet. So again, a topic to see the differentiation and see what each species has an effect on the environment.
Great. I see also a question from Gaitari. I think I can answer this question because the person is asking what is the value of live whale in comparison to the dead one. I remember that you said $2 to $3 million for a live one and $5,000 $50,000 for the dead one. Okay. Yeah. So at least that one we have straight. And then I would like to move to another question from Nathaniel, asking if you know if there is research on the effect of fishery waste being thrown into the Bay of Bengal influencing small whales.
Sorry, the effect of plastics and rubbish in the water on small whales?
Yes, in specifically in the Bay of Bengal.
Well, I do know that quite a lot of whales do live in the Gulf of Bengal, like blue whales. You have Bryde's whales, there's dolphins. Well, the animals on itself are smart enough not to eat pieces of plastic by itself, but baleen whales, they bulge feed. So they go for places where there's a lot of plankton around, and plankton sometimes is all around drifting plastic bottles, and then baleen whales don't see the difference, and they just make one big gulp, and they press with their tongue all the water out, but then they swallow plastic bottles with the plankton towards the stomach. And the number of whales dying from plastic being collected in the stomachs is growing. I don't know specifically for the Gulf of Bengal, but I know in this Gulf there's a lot of plastic being being transported by the rivers in it. So I can imagine it's quite a difference. So if you're a fisherman or fisherwoman in that Gulf and you start collecting fish, maybe on the way back you should take some rubbish back to the country, because that will help the next day indirectly, so more whales can survive and they take care of the growth of your fish stock.
Yeah. What a great answer. I see a couple of questions that are really about nature-based solutions, and actually we're trying to understand how the whale poo counts as a nature-based solution. So could you explain a little bit how can you define whale poo as a nature-based solution?
Well, I can give a nice example of what the Dutch government is doing right now. They pointed out an area in the North Sea where they're going to store carbon dioxide for which being produced by Tata Steel and Shell. The costs are 2 to 3 billion euros for a 5-year spell of time. If we, for example, with this money, I think we could buy out all Japanese, Norwegian, and Icelandic whaling ships. It's much cheaper, and we're working on nature-based solutions, because the current whales and their offspring, its interest will keep on feeding or helping out the phytoplankton and the growth. So there will be more carbon dioxide where we pay for now, even as a government. We don't have to do this, but we don't take this into our measurements. We only see trees and forests and technical solution. So this is a very expensive technical solution, but if we focus on this particularly nature-based solution, keep the whales alive, and if you do so, it's not for just a 5-year spell of time, but for it will keep on going, and even the effect of whales will only grow because the offspring will also help capturing carbon dioxide and producing oxygen. So if there's one neglected nature-based solution, to my opinion, then this is it.
Yeah, and I think you also mentioned that restoring mangroves and all kinds of nature-based solutions that are solutions that we implement on land are also contributing to the well-being of whales. So in that way, there is like a closed system, and all the actions are enhancing each other and complementing and contributing to well-being of all the animals and plant species that are forming our biodiversity, I think. I saw in the chat a question, one more technical question and one more, let's say, moral question. So the first one, the more technical, does a specific species of whales stay in specific regions of the oceans, or do all types of whales move around the entire ocean when migrating? That's a question from Gayatri.
I'm not sure I got the question on itself.
Do the species stay in specific regions, or do they move all over the ocean? So are there specific species that are found in specific regions? Or
Well, there are specific migrating whales like the humpback, the northern right whale, the southern right whale, the blue whales. But some species, they stay more or less in their same area, like the Brutus whale or the minke whale. It does move around, but it doesn't have very big migration routes. It might go further up north, but stays more or less in the same Gulf or a bit more south. But for the Gulf of Bengal, there's the Brutus whale. And well, seasonally, you have the blue whales there as well, which are the biggest ones. And the same is for, well, most dolphin species are sticking around with coastal areas and they go up and down there. And there's a lot of species in the Gulf of Bengal. So you have the large whales and you have the dolphins, and some stay and some move up and down.
Okay, very clear. So then Maud is asking two questions. The first one is about, well, the question is, what is your perspective on how to preserve biodiversity and support whales while sustaining livelihoods of people in coastal areas? And then those livelihoods consist often of tourism, fishery, offshore energy production. So is there like do they contribute to each other, or is there a kind of contradiction and people want one thing, but it's not per se good for the whales? That's I think what the question is.
What I know about fishing men, mainly in these coastal waters, they are not directly a big threat. But they can be a big threat if they leave their nets or fishing lines on the water. Big whales and dolphins can be entangled. So telling these people, informing them and explaining why it is important, because most people think all around the world, not specifically there, if you don't need something, then you just throw it away. And then it's out of your hands or out of your sight, so it doesn't matter anymore. But if you turn your back within a few days, a dolphin might be caught in the net, die, and that's what we call bycatch. Sometimes it's not even on purpose, but it does influence. And I go back to what I said before, education and telling the story behind the whales and what local people can do, and that's per location, that's different. If there's an area where there's a lot of people fishing, then they do have a link, but not only in stopping things like throwing away bottles or nets, but also if they start understanding why the whale for them is so important, then this other message comes probably more naturally, because they will see the whales as the ones who is or what is fertilizing and taking care of their fishing garden. Without the whales, there would be less fish in their area. So that's actually the message, what should be spread there.
Yeah, and maybe it's not so well known. There's a question also from Maud. How does mangrove restoration help the whales in the ocean?
How does mangrove growth in the area helps the whales? Not directly, but I think it's the other way around. Well, there's all kind of links, but the whale poo finally also by the nutrients, but also by algae being flooded in the mangroves, give nutrients in the mangrove areas. So I think that's more of one way. On the other hand, in the mangroves, there's fish laying their eggs, and these eggs become fish larvae. They go back and become part of the food which whales do eat. So there could be breeding areas for the fish what whales eat.
Very clear. Yeah. There's, I think, one technical question. I'm not sure if I fully understand the question, but maybe you can help with that. So there's a question, when whale breach the water, is this potentially a way to release manure?
You mean when the whales jump out of the water, I guess?
That's what I think the question
Yeah.
is about. Yeah.
It's not how they poo. They do this on the surface, but they won't jump out of the water for it. I once saw a young sperm whale pooing at the surface, but that's without the jump. The jump of most whales is what we as people understand. It's showing off towards others or giving a signal, so in a communication way. But it's not the way they release. No.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot that we can still learn about whales, and that can be also become more well known. So I was just curious how to become a whale Poo Ambassador. What does it take, and what does it entail?
Well, you become already a whale poo ambassador as you start talking about it with your neighbor, your friend, your family, and you can show. We have developed a few years ago the whale poo simulation.com. It's in English and in Dutch, and it takes you only a few minutes to see how it works, but it's an interactive website. And if you share this with your friends and family, you already have become a whale poo ambassador.
Okay, great. And how do you earn the badge that you are wearing?
Oh, well, digitally, yeah. But we have in May, we go to Zutphen at the Expeditie Next, and we will be in the zoo of Amersfoort, where we play a game, our whale poo game. So if you meet us, you can get a badge. I'm wearing one or another one, and then you can show other people. And we call ourselves the whale poo ambassadors because it's triggering questions from people. And because the word poo is always making people smile or laugh, and whales are seen as kind animals, which they are. But so I always get questions about this, and that's a good thing. Yeah.
And I think that you are a very good whale poo ambassador. So thank you for making us understand how the system works, but also making us enthusiastic about the whales and reminding us about the fact that there is still so much that can be done to understand the role of whales in oceans better, but also to protect it and maybe even gain more carbon capture by protecting whales.
Can I add something?
Yes, sure.
Because I already made a call, but if you are really interested as a student and you're looking for topics here in the Netherlands or abroad, there's a huge potential for your research. And we are starting off a whale poo bank together with international organizations. So we store whale poo, well, we start in Europe, but might go all over the world. So for research reasons, there will be fridges, so to speak, or freezers with whale poo. And there's more, not directly lab work only, but education work. So if you are looking for hints or advices, just send us an email. I will answer it.
Okay, oh, that's great. But I think this poo should be in the oceans, not in the fridges.
Yeah, but that's for research.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks everybody for being part of this webinar. Thank you very much, Frank, for sharing this fascinating story. Have a great afternoon, great day, and I hope that you will all become whale poo ambassadors.
Yeah. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.